21st January, Saint Agnes, Virgin and Martyr, Memoria. She suffered martyrdom at Rome either in the second half of the 3rd century or, more probably, at the beginning of the 4th century. Pope Damasus embellished her tomb with sacred verses, and many of the fathers, following the example of Saint Ambrose, spoke of her with great praise. A reading from the treatise of Saint Ambrose on Virgins. She was still too young for punishment, but already ripe for victory. It is the feast of a virgin. Let us imitate her chastity. It is the feast of a martyr. Let us offer our sacrifice. It is the feast of Saint Agnes. Her martyrdom is said to have taken place in her 12th year. And the more hateful was the cruelty, which did not spare even so young a child. Surely the greater was the power of faith, which found a witness in one of such tender years. Was there even room for a wound in her little body? Yet even if she did not have space to take the sword, she was able to overcome the sword. Girls of that age cannot even take the angry looks of their parents, and they usually cry at the prick of a needle as though it were a wound. But Agnes was fearless under the bloody hands of the executioners. She was unmoved by the heavy weight of the clanging chains. She offered her whole body to the sword of the raging soldier. She had as yet no experience of death, but she was ready for it. If she was dragged unwillingly to the altar of sacrifice, she was ready to stretch forth her hands to Christ amidst the flames, and even in the fires of sacrilege, to give the triumphant sign of the Lord, who conquers all. She was ready to put her hands and neck into the iron bands, even though none of the chains was small enough to enclose her little limbs. Is this a new kind of martyrdom, where the girl was still too young for punishment, but old enough for victory? Too young for battle, yet ready to win the crown? Her tender age was a disadvantage, but she won the trial of virtue. If she had been a bride, she would not have so hastened to the marriage couch as she, being a virgin, hurried with joyful step to the place of execution, her head adorned with Christ instead of plates, and with her own virtues instead of garlands of flowers. All were weeping, but she was dry-eyed. Everyone marveled that she was so spendthrift with her life, which she had hardly tasted, but was now giving up as though she had finished with it. All were astounded that she should come forward as a witness to the Godhead when she was still too young to be her own mistress. It was her final achievement that men believed that she had received from God what could not come from man. For what is beyond nature comes from the author of nature. You can imagine with what threats the executioner tried to frighten her, and the allurements to persuade her, and how many people there were who would have wished to marry her. But her reply was, "It would be an insult to my spouse to think that I would consent to you. He who chose me first shall possess me. Why do you delay, executioner? Let this body perish, which could be loved by eyes which I do not want." She stood in prayer and bowed her head. You could see the executioner trembling as though it were he who was condemned. You could see his right hand shaking, his face growing pale at her danger, though the child had no fear of her own. In one victim, then, you have a twofold witness in martyrdom, to modesty and to religion. She both remained a virgin and achieved martyrdom.